Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the Taliban wanting to continue Afghanistan's cultural and trade ties with India. We also take a quick look at Sumit Antil breaking the world record at the Paralympics in Tokyo. But first, we talk about Assam. Exactly 2 years back, the National Register of Citizens, or the NRC, was published for the state of Assam. The NRC is a list which has been used as a tool to identify illegal immigrants in the state who may have come in from Bangladesh. The idea is that only those who are on the list are to be considered Indian citizens. If you are on the list, that means you have proved that you are in fact an Indian citizen. And if you are not on the list, then your citizenship has come under question. And when it was published on the 31st of August 2019, around 19 lakh people were left out of it. And their citizenship is still in limbo. But even those who did make it to the NRC, many of them have continued to face problems. And the reason for this is that they have not been able to get their Aadhaar cards made because of the NRC. To understand why this has happened, we spoke to Tora Agarwala, who recently reported on this issue. And she broke it down for us.
So there are two layers to this problem. One is that this is stuck in bureaucratic red tape. And the second is that there is a lack of clarity in the NRC exercise itself. So because of a combination of these two things, a lot of people who are in the NRC have not been able to get their Aadhaar cards till now. And at the heart of this entire biometric freeze is SOP, which was a standard operating procedure, which was dated to November 2018, in between the publication of the draft list on July 31st, 2018, and the complete list on August 31st, 2019.
She explains that before the final NRC was published, a draft version of it was put out in July. And in that list, a number of people were left out. These people then had to go to NRC hearings to prove that they did belong in the NRC, that they were in fact citizens of India.
So these people, when they went for their hearings, this happened across Assam, wherever you live in Assam. And whenever they went for these hearings, their biometrics were also recorded. And they were basically told that when your name comes out in the NRC, then you'll get the Aadhaar. So we are recording your biometrics now. If your name is on the list, then you'll get your Aadhaar card as well.
This was done based on a clause that was included in a Supreme Court approved SOP, that is, a standard operating procedure.
I spoke to officials who were part of this process for drafting this clause. This clause was made like an extra security measure because they feared that those people who were excluded from the NRC, they might change their identity. So this was a way to keep a tab on their digital identity. So they introduced this clause. And they said that once your name is out on the list, you'll get your Aadhaar. There won't be a problem with that.
Tora says that around 27 lakh people went to these hearings to get their names onto the final NRC. These are the people who submitted their biometrics. When the list was finally published, 19 lakh people got left out of it, but the rest made it, though neither of them have been able to get an Aadhaar card. So how is it that people who were promised by this SOP that they would get an Aadhaar card after the NRC got published still haven't been able to get one after 2 years?
So the contention lies in the wording of the SOP. The SOP basically says that those who are in the final NRC will get their Aadhaar cards as and when.
Note that the clause says final NRC. And the issue is that the NRC, which was supposed to be final, is stuck in a limbo. Like the BJP state government in Assam now refuses even to consider the current NRC as final.
Because they feel that the list is incorrect and certain percentage of the list needs to be re-verified. So they haven't accepted the NRC. The NRC state coordinator, H.D. Sharma, He also has filed an affidavit in the Supreme Court and said that this list we have is not the final NRC, that this is just a supplementary NRC, and he's also pushing for a re-verification. And apart from that, the RGI, the Registrar General of India, even they haven't notified the NRC. So till they do it, it's not a gazetted document. Apart from that, even the Supreme Court, which was monitoring the exercise, which, since all these years from 2016 to right up to the publication of the list in 2019, there were hearings. This SOP was also approved by the Supreme Court. Since January 6, 2020, they haven't heard the matter at all. So this list it's just there, that's all. And nothing is happening with it right now.
All the officials that Tora spoke to say that they have no clarity whether this is the final NRC or not. Plus, NRC state coordinators themselves have said that this is not the final NRC.
I mean, nobody's against giving the Aadhaar cards out because everyone knows that this is an important document for people. But they're saying that if we give the data out, it's like violating a Supreme Court order which says that Aadhaar for only those whose names are in the final NRC, only those can get their Aadhaar. So nobody wants to fall foul of the Supreme Court, and basically it's being sort of passed on from department to department, and everyone's scared of violating the Supreme Court order. And then since there's no clarity on the finality of the NRC, they're not forthcoming with the data. So the state government is telling RGI to look into the matter or maybe try and relax the SOP. Basically, somebody has to move the Supreme Court and tell the Supreme Court that, okay, hey, look, this clause 9 of the SOP is giving a lot of problem to people. So maybe it can be relaxed or maybe it can be modified in such a way that at least the Aadhaar can be handed out to people. So unless this clause is relaxed, nothing can be done.
Tora tells us that right now, the state is saying that the center should approach the Supreme Court regarding this, while others say that the state itself should be doing that. But for the time being, no one is doing anything about it, and because of this, lakhs of people continue to suffer. And those being most affected by this are the younger people.
Students, say, who are in college or who are in university, who are trying to apply for scholarships. Most college forms require your Aadhaar card, or there are other employed people the companies would say that we'll give your salary only if you have your Aadhaar card. I mean, the Aadhaar seems to be a very important document which companies ask for or even universities ask for all the time. So this young lot, and they've been very vocal on Twitter about it. They are constantly tweeting about it, tagging the Chief Minister and Home Minister and the Prime Minister. They've been writing into all these offices, the Home and Political Department, the Aadhaar office in Guwahati, the NRC office. All these offices, if you go to, they have I think letters probably in thousands from aggrieved citizens saying that please fix this. We are in the NRC and still we are facing so many problems.
And it's the daily hassles that are bothering people. For this story, Tora had spoken to a 33-year-old named Bhanu Upadhyay, a postdoctoral candidate who belongs to a village in Upper Assam.
And, he told me that the fact that he doesn't have an Aadhaar comes up like almost every other day, even if it's small things like getting a gas connection, renting a house, or even, say, getting a postpaid connection. So he said these are small things which I have been able to work around with. I do it on my friend's ID or something like that. But what he's really worried about is when he applies for jobs in the coming few months, he wants to be a professor in a central university. So, when they ask for Aadhaar, what does he do then? So these are the kind of problems people are facing. There are, of course, older people as well. I've spoken to housewives in different parts of Assam where currently they're not getting a particular scheme or a benefit, but it's just the mental stress around it. This lady was telling me that every other day she gets a message that link your Aadhaar to your PAN or link it to your bank account and all of that. So she's saying that, okay, fine, now I'm ignoring it, but there will come a point of time when, suppose I want a loan, suppose I want something like that, then what happens, So people are also living with a lot of stress, and they also worry about, right now that hasn't happened, but eventually I think the government also wants to introduce this One Nation, One Ration Card program, right? So what happens then? Then if you're denied your basic amenities, then it becomes a bigger problem. I think honestly right now it's easy for the authorities to sort of ignore this because it's a very small pressure group and it's frustrated students who are tweeting and they're writing into the offices. But when the pressure group becomes larger, then it'll be a problem.
Now, apart from the problems that many who have made it to the NRC are facing, there are of course those 19 lakh who haven't made it to the list at all. They haven't been able to get an Aadhaar card. Plus, their citizenship is still under question after 2 years.
The mental trauma of not being in the list or not knowing whether you're Indian or what the court thinks, that also adds to their ambiguity around the whole thing. So a lot of people, passports are on hold because of this. I know last year my colleague Abhishek had written a story exactly about this where he profiled a number of people, like someone's marriage proposal was rejected because that girl wasn't on the NRC. So the family thought that it'll be a problem later. So there are little things like this which are affecting people who are not on the NRC. Life is carrying on as it is. You just don't know whether you are legally Indian or not. And you don't know when the state will come after you and suddenly say that they probably won't do that, but the fear is still there. So that's what happened. And even 2 months back when the chief minister was at one particular conference, he also said that he wants everyone's passports to be verified within a week. He was telling the police officers that, all this should be done fast, except people whose citizenship is in question. So yeah, these are the things that affect them probably in their daily lives. And the fact is that they're living with this sort of mental burden as what is happening with the NRC. They haven't been able to defend their citizenship till now. So these are the kind of things that people are living with every day.
A lot of people in Assam wanted the NRC exercise to take place. But now that it has, the stakeholders aren't happy with the results. Many want the list revised, including the BJP government in Assam.
It's sort of a topic which is not in the news cycle anymore at all. People are hardly talking about it. And more than the general public, the government has made it clear that they don't accept the NRC in the current form. In fact, it's one of their poll promises and it was also a part of the manifesto. And they said that they'd wanted a 10% re-verification in particular districts. So they were unhappy because they thought too many Hindu Bengalis were left out of the NRC. Now then the other stakeholder in the process was the APW, which was the NGO which had pushed for NRC in the Supreme Court. They feel that the NRC list has too many illegal people were included in the list. So they are also unhappy. Even they are also saying that this list doesn't work. I mean, general public did want the NRC, but right now it's something people don't really talk or care about much right now. So yeah, I mean, it's something which happened. A lot of money was spent on it, but it just, for all practical purposes, it's on hold right now.
And next we talk about the Taliban. On Saturday, a member of the Taliban leadership in Qatar made a statement directed at India. The person said that the Taliban wants to continue Afghanistan's cultural, economic, political and trade ties with India like it has done in the past. Now, the person who made this statement was Sher Mohammad Abbas Stanekzai, the deputy head of Taliban's office in Doha, which is the capital of Qatar. And he made this statement in a carefully scripted video message that was broadcast on Saturday on Taliban's social media platforms and one of Afghanistan's television channels. This was the first categorical statement directed at India by a senior leader of the Taliban since they captured power in Kabul on August 15. In this segment, we speak to Nirupama Subramanian, who writes on South Asian affairs for the Indian Express, about the significance of this statement. And she says that Stanekzai, in his statement, was actually laying out an overall policy statement of the Taliban.
He was talking about government formation, he was talking about many other things, and his statement on India was part of that whole 45-minute video message. And it is important in the sense that, and significant in the sense that this is the first policy statement that is coming out from the Taliban side. And of course, it is being rumored that Sher Abbas Stanekzai may play an important role in the next government. He may even be foreign minister in the next government. That is speculation, so we can take that for what it's worth. But definitely he'll have some role. So in that sense, it is quite important that he said what he had to say.
Nirupama says that Stanexai talked about many things, including the historical ties between India and Afghanistan, trading by air and trading by road through Pakistan, which right now is only allowed one way, from Afghanistan to India, and not the other way around.
So in that sense, I think this is the first time that somebody has spoken so extensively about India-Taliban relations. Earlier, people have said, others have said that yes, we want good relations with India. Suhail Shaheen has said it on occasion. He is the spokesman. And also Stanexai said it also previously. So this is the first time it's come out in this detailed fashion after the Taliban have taken over in Kabul. Now let us remember that the Taliban are also keen to project that they are a reasonable group, that they are a reasonable force, because at this point, their most important thing is first, A, government formation, of course, and then B, they want international legitimacy for the government they set up. In all likelihood, they will call it the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, and they want that Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan is recognized by the world, is seen as a legitimate entity that is ruling Afghanistan. Let us not forget that the previous Taliban Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan was recognized only by 3 countries. It was recognized by Pakistan, Saudi, and United Arab Emirates. So the Taliban at this point are also trying to reach out to a lot of people. They're trying to reach out west, east, north, south, everyone, and India is part of that.
Now the question is, will India respond to this statement and actually engage with the Taliban? Something that it hasn't done in the past, especially considering the statement comes at a time when the Taliban is no longer being seen as a global outcast, and other countries are trying to change their strategies as well. Nirupama says that her sense is that India is not going to jump at this and recognize the Taliban.
They're not going to rush into this because, after all, I mean, if you look at it in realpolitik terms, international legitimacy is something that India can leverage as well. I mean, the world is doing it. The world is leveraging the grant of legitimacy to the Taliban to make the case for an inclusive government, to make the case for retaining some of the democratic gains of the previous 20 years. They're talking about women's rights. They're talking about democratic rights. So everybody is bargaining, and India will not rush into. Right now, I think, that is my sense, that India will not rush in to make contact with the Taliban, also because India has a heavy baggage of the past with the Taliban. One of those is the hijacking of the IC-814 to Kandahar in Afghanistan in 1999. And in exchange for the hostages aboard that Indian Airlines plane, we had to part with Masood Azhar and Omar Sheikh. Masood Azhar, of course, went on to set up the Jaish-e-Mohammed, which is based in Pakistan, and he's based in Pakistan as well. And you know how many terrorist attacks in India Jaish-e-Mohammed is blamed for.
Plus, she says that the other thing that will be on India's mind is the Haqqani network, a group which is part of the Taliban and, according to the Americans, was responsible for the 2008 bombing of the Indian embassy in Kabul, in which 58 people were killed, including a senior Indian diplomat and a senior army officer.
So these are things that will weigh on India's mind. I think India will also wait to see how much of a role Pakistan has, how much weight it carries with the Taliban, how much influence it will continue to exercise in a new dispensation before actually coming to its own conclusions about what to do, what kind of relations to maintain with the Taliban, and the whole legitimacy question. The world is moving towards recognition that Taliban are now in the rulers of Afghanistan and they are going to stay there. Plus, the world will have to deal with them.
She says the world right now is looking to supply humanitarian aid to Afghanistan with so many people in crisis there. And for that, they will have to deal with the Taliban. And as far as India engaging with the Taliban is concerned, there is also the Pakistan factor to keep in mind, which we know supports and backs the Taliban.
I mean, if Pakistan is the controlling seat, should we not deal with Afghanistan as a separate entity? And if we deal with the Taliban, Are we actually jeopardizing our one-to-one relations with Afghanistan, our historic, cultural and economic ties, our friendships in Afghanistan, by actually dealing with an entity which is seen as a proxy for Afghanistan, which is why I said, I think we'll wait and watch and see how the dust settles down on all this, where Pakistan is in the equation, how much influence they will carry in the new government, what weight they carry, all that.
Now, in the past, Pakistan has not wanted India to have close ties with Afghanistan. But now that the Taliban is in power over there, Nirupama says that it might feel differently and may want to control things based on that.
So at this point, I think what we have to remember is that Pakistan is really seeing itself as victorious in this whole episode. It has now a friendly government in Kabul, something for which it has yearned for nearly 20 years. It had pushed talks with the Taliban for this very reason, because the governments that came into after 2001, that governments that ruled from Kabul, were very anti-Pakistan. And you can say they were very pro-India. India had a huge role in the development of Afghanistan. It carried much influence with the Afghan rulers. We had lots of friends in Afghanistan, from president downwards, and among common people. Everybody loved India. This was something that rankled with Pakistan. Pakistan, I think, resented the kind of influence that India had gained, and all under the American umbrella. Now that it sees that it has some control, we can't say how much control it will have, whether the Taliban will one day break free from Pakistani influence. All this is in the future. But as of now, it sees itself as having a friendly dispensation in Kabul, one over which it can exercise some degree of control. And it probably hopes to control the geoeconomics now, the parameters of this geoeconomics.
This is why she says that Stanexai made all those references to trade between India and Afghanistan.
And let's not forget that Stanexai is seen by the Indian establishment as a very pro-Pakistan person. And I mean, we'll have to wait and see how this works out. But I think the long and short of it is that Pakistan now feels that it's in the driving seat as far as Afghanistan is concerned, and that it can, whether it is trade with India or whether it's any other ties between India and Afghanistan, it can sort of exercise an influence and control over what happens, which is the reason why there will be some hesitation in the Indian establishment against jumping in. They'll want to wait and watch and see how it goes.
And in the end, we talk about Paralympics. Yesterday, Sumit Antal broke the world record thrice with 3 of his 6 javelin throws in the final of the Tokyo Paralympics. With this, Sumit Antal won India's second gold in the tournament and the first in athletics. The 23-year-old from Sonipat in Haryana, who lost his left leg below the knee after he was involved in a motorbike accident in 2015, sent the javelin 68.55 meters in his 5th attempt, which was the best of the day by quite a distance and a new world record. Antal is the world number 1 in the F64 category, which is for athletes with a leg amputation who compete with prosthetics in a standing position. Sumit was initially a wrestler, but the motorbike accident brought his life to a halt. He gave up on his dream to become a wrestler but continued on the sporting path. Antal's win brought India its 7th medal at the Games. Shooter Avni Lekhari and Sumit have won gold medals. 3 more silvers have been won in athletics and 1 in table tennis. Plus 1 bronze medal has also been won in athletics. You were listening to 3 Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.